Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, good day to you, depending where you are in the world. We're doing our nighttime devotion from the devotional Conflict and Courage. The title today, For Such a Time as This. Esther 4:14, and who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this. A certain day was appointed on which the Jews were to be destroyed and their property confiscated. Little did the king realize the far-reaching results that would have accompanied the complete carrying out of this decree. Satan himself, the hidden instigator of the scheme, was trying to rid the earth of those who preserved the knowledge of the true God. The decree of the Medes and Persians could not be revoked. Apparently, there was no hope. All the Israelites were doomed to destruction. But the plots of the enemy were defeated by a power that reigns among the children of men. In the providence of God, Esther, a Jewess who feared the Most High, had been made queen of the Medo-Persian kingdom. Mordecai was a near relative of hers. In their extremity, they decided to appeal to Xerxes in behalf of their people. Esther was to venture into his presence as an intercessor. Who knoweth, said Mordecai, whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? The crisis that Esther faced demanded quick, earnest action. But both she and Mordecai realized that unless God should work mightily in their behalf, their own efforts would be unavailing. So Esther took time for communion with God, the source of her strength. Go, she directed Mordecai, gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. To every household and every school, to every parent, teacher, and child upon whom has shone the light of the gospel, comes at this crisis the question put to Esther, the queen, at that momentous crisis in Israel's history. Who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So this is the story of Esther, and if you read it, you'll fully understand what this is saying. But basically, she was a Jew, and a virgin, a single, unattached young lady, and for various reasons, she was able to marry the king. The king chose her to marry, and she became the queen. But in those customs, in those days, whether she's the queen doesn't necessarily mean she has open access to the king as such. And through various schemes, underhanded schemes, an advisor close to the king managed to get a decree signed that at one point very soon in the future all the Jews are allowed to be killed. That there would be one day where everyone was allowed to attack the Jews, all those that were Jewish. for whatever reason, the king was unaware that this was the case. And certainly unaware the fact that his wife was a Jew. So what had to happen, she had to come clean and say, I am a Jew. And this is what's going to happen to all the Jewish people. And if that's the case, that all the Jewish people are going to be attacked and some were all killed that day, she would be one of them. So then she called Mordecai. Mordecai was her uncle. And they prayed, they fasted, and they got all the other Jews to pray and fast, and she and her maidens inside the palace pray and fast. Then she sought counsel with the king. And by the grace of God, they were able to rescue the Jews. Not all of them were annihilated. And so the most famous line from the life of Esther and the book of Esther is, for such a time as this. Which is what she said was, or what was said was, she was made queen of that kingdom for such a time as this. Now, if you go back to Ecclesiastes 3, reasons and seasons, this is what this is basically pointing to. Esther was queen, and the whole point of her being at that time was for such a time as this, to save the Jewish nation. You, me, we have our appointed time too. And I'm smiling because I met a young man today. When I say young man, he's younger than me. And he had a dream, I think, about being anointed, which I think is so profound, so deep. And it made me smile deeply. Remember, David was anointed at a very young age, and it was quite a few years before he was actually made king, and he had to learn and study and be as God created him to be. So when the time came to be king, he could step into that role, knowing full well he was anointed all those years ago, and everything he had to go through, and he went through a lot, everything was to strengthen him to be the man God created him to be, to step into that role as the King of Israel. And the young man today, anointed, you have your time coming. All of you also listening, you also have your time to come. If it hasn't already happened, it is to come. You will go through tests and trials, especially if your time hasn't come yet. The enemy is going to come at you with everything to deter you from fulfilling your purpose. And one day, you will know your time for such a time as this.